Hi all, Moonlight Rider 24 here. So, I know I've been gone for a couple of months now, and honestly, what happened was that I wrote the script for the Hero of the Rails hick bomb, but it just turned out to be so long that I just lost motivation, and then once school started again, I didn't have time to work on it. But over break, I was able to make time, and while I can't promise a consistent upload schedule because of how hectic grad school is, I can say that I'll try my best, and you can probably expect one video every 2 months or so, but I can't make any promises. So one thing I want to get out of the way is yes, the Hero of the Rails video will come someday. The video is currently sitting at 1 hour and 16 minutes. That's a long video to edit. So I'm going to try and cut it down to less than an hour, as I don't think anyone really wants to hear me ramble longer than that for a movie that I don't think really warrants it. Maybe for a movie I'm more passionate about, but we'll get to that much later. So for now, I wanted to try something a bit shorter but also more fun. Over the last year, I've been seeing a lot of people going back and revisiting the classic Thomas seasons and taking a look at them both as a whole and at the individual episodes, with the Yellow Striker, for example, ranking the episodes, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So here we are, the first in a series where I'll be ranking every episode in almost every season of Thomas and Friends, season by season. And then, eventually, I'll do a huge ranking where I'll rank every single episode together. But that's a long ways away, so let's just stick to the smaller stuff first. And of course, like the specials, I'll be going in chronological order, starting with, of course, the one that started it all, Season 1. Now, I think it goes without saying that we all respect and at least like this season for what it is. It's classic, it's simple, it's charming, and it's what kicked off one of the greatest children's shows of all time, and one of my personal favorite shows and franchises in general. While yes, many may argue it's a bit slower than the other seasons, I think that's what makes it so charming and so lovable. Well, yeah, it's not my favorite season, it is absolutely one of the best and in my top 5, easy. But how does it hold up after about 40 years? Well, let's find out, starting from the top. For this ranking, we'll be looking at the episodes from worst to best, and all the while, I'll be trying to break down the development and arcs of each character as to analyze their development over time, and potentially talk about in a bigger video about each of the main characters someday. Also, to make things easier, we'll be using a tier list, with the episodes being put into one of 4 tiers. Well, it's only 4 this time because all episodes are at least good or better. There'll be more tiers as we progress through the seasons. So the tiers will be good, great, amazing, and phenomenal, with phenomenal being among the best of the series. So let's go. The good tier, or C tier, but I don't want to call it that because it's not bad. It's just good. As none of these episodes are really mediocre, they're just good at worst. So let's get into it. 26. Thomas and the Guard. Probably the weakest episode of the season because nothing really happens, and that's okay. I appreciate another story of Thomas's impatience, especially on his branch line, even if it is filler and kinda unnecessary, as it was only made to fill the 4th slot in Thomas's 2nd book. Also, seeing the guard run to catch up and his face were kinda funny, so that was cool. Anyway, yeah, weakest episode of the season, but it's part of Thomas's development to learn to be more patient, and it's still good. Yep, there's only one episode that's just good. Everything else is great, amazing, or phenomenal. Goes to show how amazing the classic series is, right? Anyway, B tier. 25. Thomas in Trouble. This episode is good. Kind of funny, too. Nothing too special aside from Thomas's memorable run-in with the law and Toby joining Topham's Railway. Just continues Thomas's arc of him being more competent and careful. Solid episode. 24. Percy Runs Away. The ending to the Big Engine's 3-part arc. In this one, the engines have finally learned sense after seeing how well the railway can run without them, and how bad being stuck in the shed sucks, which begins their redemption as characters overall. As although they'll each always collectively be stuck up and have a superiority complex in their own way, they all mature in their own way as well and become better engines, and it starts here. But the main story of this episode is Percy and his little roller coaster, and it's a fun one too. Edward and the tank engines are rewarded and sent back to the branch lines. I'm not crazy about the narrator saying the engines played with the trucks, but it's fine. And Percy, who is as cheeky as ever, receives some karma in the form of a big scare as he is almost hit by Gordon at full speed. Percy running away in fear is hilarious and very entertaining and well done. But I also really appreciate the ending note that Gordon praises Percy for being careful and that they are now friends, despite how cheeky he is. Great little episode and conclusion to the Big Engine's arc, and memorable for Percy's little runaway, but nothing too special. 23. James and the Coaches. The James episodes. While I have a great soft spot for them, as James is my third favorite character, they aren't too special in this season. Well, 2 of them aren't, but they're still pretty great and entertaining. The James episodes only get better from here, and trust me, they get phenomenal as the series goes on. But this is definitely the weakest of the 3 of this season. Well, yeah, it's definitely a good start to his arc. It's nothing too special. His impatience and cockiness already get the best of him, even with the Fat Controller himself. But James has a really nice run with Edward, and it's pleasant to watch as he begins to learn the line with the most experienced engine. Just sucks how bad he screwed up. He's even threatened to have his coat taken away, something that's referenced again and again. Classic, he hates blue. And then of course, there's the bootlace story. Comedic and simple, but nothing too special, but it's something he'll never live down. Overall, a good start to James's arc of becoming more humble, which starts here, and although it has a semi-conclusion, his series-long arc lasts until season 21, when I think he has finally changed his ways. He's a mixed traffic, versatile engine, and he should use that to his advantage. Despite not liking pulling trucks, it's part of what makes him special. Not every engine is like that and has a gorgeous red coat of paint and a lot of determination and good heart, and for that he should be proud, but not arrogant. He wants to be special and get attention, as he likely knows he was nothing too special before he came to Sodor, just a standard mogul. But upon getting this special opportunity, he has the potential for greatness on Sodor, and seizes it and gets his special red coat, and that is where his ego begins. Although the accident likely began the process of him being humbled. Also, who doesn't love James's classic jazzy theme? And yeah, it was a good idea to merge the 2 stories of James and the Top Hat with James and the Bootlace. 22. Thomas Goes Fishing. Thomas Goes Fishing is a fun story we all remember because of how goofy it was. It's very cute, endearing, and the first of many stories where an engine wants to do something, but it's just so outlandish and unrealistic that everyone else teases them. I.e., Percy wanting a scarf, Duck wanting to sail away to faraway lands, etc. And then it either ends up happening and it backfires and then they get laughed at, or they learn the lesson another way, which we'll talk about when that episode comes. But yeah, this episode is just really funny and not anything notable otherwise. Great! 21. Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow. This episode with Terrence is a very good one. Terrence and Thomas bounce off one another well, and while Terrence isn't anything too special or memorable, I do like him as a character, and it's nice to see him in other episodes, and I personally love what Helen Farrell does with him in season 21. I dare say his episode there is much better than this one, but we'll get to that much later. Anyway, classic Thomas versus another vehicle episode, as Thomas is completely rude and brags about how cool he is to some random farmer that's proud of being a tractor. People say Terrence has no personality, but I disagree. I think he's a little braggy about being a tractor and likes teasing Thomas because of the little rivalry they have. But he's otherwise very intelligent and laid back. And of course, the crash is fun, and it's great seeing Terrence come to the rescue and they become friends. Cute. B tier. Great, but not as amazing as Thomas and Bertie. 20. Whistles and Sneezes. This is a fun one. Both plots of Henry sneezing at the little brats, with their karma being so satisfying, and Gordon's whistle getting jammed, are both comedic and entertaining as Gordon is humbled while Henry proves himself to be resourceful once again. I appreciate that it's a fun little follow-up to the Flying Kipper, with Gordon being a little jealous of Henry getting a new shape and pulling the express, but gets his comeuppance and knows not to tease Henry. Doesn't stop him from doing it in the future though. I also love the little interaction between Edward and Henry, as it shows their wholesome little friendship in the series that we don't see enough. But yeah, fun little episode and a great end to Henry's arc. Memorable, but nothing too amazing. Also, this face. And that's all of B tier. Yep, just a couple of episodes that are just great. And now we get into A tier, where most of the season lies. 19. The Sad Story of Henry. Another classic tale from 3 railway engines, and it's great. We see how arrogant and stubborn Henry can be, and how it comes to bite him on the buffers very early in his years. Also very funny moments with the passengers pulling and pushing and Topham not helping. Classic. So yeah, you feel kind of bad for Henry when he's blocked in, but at the same time, I think he learned his lesson. Don't you? Great beginning to Henry's arc of becoming a more humble, mature, and less arrogant engine. And although he'll never be a saint like Edward, he'll still end up as one of the most badass, sympathetic, and complex characters in the series, and an A tier one at that. 18. Down the Mine. The second part in the Thomas and Gordon Do Stupid Shit arc And like Off the Rails, it's great, but not as strong in my opinion. The beginning is hilarious with Thomas's ditchwater remark, but even Annie and Clarabelle are appalled. Thomas's stupidity with the sign as well as these rude remarks make his karma in the form of the crash and Topham's reprimand well deserved. However, after being rescued by Gordon, the two form an alliance that holds true for a chunk of the series, despite them occasionally arguing and teasing, but I still love the notion of the alliance a lot. Just sucks the sequel to both episodes is, again, delayed to another season. But the sequel in the forms of Paint, Pots, and Queens is a phenomenal episode, but we'll get to that one later. But for now, this one is A tier. 17. Tenders and Turntables. The beginning of the Big Engine saga in this season, and it's great. I like how the narrator mentions the aftermath of Thomas leaving for his branch line and how the Big Engines miss him, both friend-wise and work-wise, and we see how lazy and pompous they can be about shunting and whatnot. I also appreciate how the narrator emphasizes why bigger engines need to turn around more than tank engines, which leads into Gordon's superiority complex of how important being a tender engine makes him. He complains to Thomas about his grief and it's hilarious. But the big engines soon get their comeuppance for causing trouble as Gordon is forced to pull his train backwards and James gets spun like a top, both thanks to turntable troubles. The humor in this episode is great, with the engines teasing one another for their shortcomings. You kind of feel bad for the big engines, but at the same time they kind of deserve it. Also, the story feels a bit incomplete without Henry's elephant being part of the saga, so he has something to grieve about. So, the engines ultimately decide to go on strike until their needs are met, and it's well done. We see the big engines' egos at full display, and it sets up their characters for the rest of the series with a great arc in this season to start. Great setup episode with solid humor. 16. Dirty Objects. Another absolute classic about James, which also starts his rivalry with Toby, which is always fun to see, as Toby always outsmarts and shows him up, satisfyingly and hilariously. Don't get me wrong, I love James, but he usually deserves it, and here is no exception. The crash is excellent, but you kind of feel bad for him as his ego finally causes him to crash again with the trucks. Classic James. Excellent episode, and James learns a good lesson. Not as strong as Troublesome Trucks, but it's sad to see this undoes his hard work in that episode. But following this, he gets better and better with trucks. 15. James and the Express. And the end of James's mini arc. James is now on Topham's good side, but continues to be teased by the other engines, especially Gordon, who brags he's the only one that can pull the Express and knows his way by instinct. On both accounts, he's proved wrong, and it's so satisfying as our boy James proves himself once again when Gordon is sent down the loop and back around, and the passengers ask for a different engine. And who else but James should be there to help? James's ambition and dreams are cute and admirable, and you really want to root for him, and in the end he gets his wish, and manages to pull the Express and is offered the possibility to pull it again another time. And it's very satisfying. Great, very satisfying end to James's arc as he has finally proved himself and earns the respect of the other engines, even making up with Gordon and becoming part of the Big Three, but will always unfortunately be the smallest one that's teased the most. Kinda ironic he joins them after being teased, huh? Again, James wants to be with the cool kids, so he does it here. Anyway, A tier episode, love James. Also, this is hilarious. Karma is always spot on in this series. Perhaps it was instinct! 14. Thomas's Christmas Party. The finale to Season 1, the first Christmas episode, and on both fronts, it's great, sweet, and cute, and gets you in the Christmas spirit around the holidays. Thomas' Christmas episodes are almost always bangers, but that's a topic for another day. Mrs. Kindly is a very sweet character too. I loved seeing all the characters from the first season come together for a really nice finale. I just wish the flashback to Miss Kindly helping Thomas was the episode itself, but the rescue and surprise party works well. Overall, it's a really great little episode, and I love it a lot. A tier. 13. Off the Rails. Classic Gordon episode, and it's really great. Gordon's ego nips him in the tender again as he intentionally tries to sabotage a special train, but comes off the line instead and falls into a ditch. The interactions with the other characters, Henry and Percy in particular, are very strong and showcase each character's personality very well, and Gordon is a peak asshole in this one. The humor is spot on, and the crash is small but solid, and Gordon gets well-deserved karma and has hopefully learned his lesson and never pulls this kind of shit again. As far as I know, or remember at least. Just sucks that his redemptive story, Leaves, is left until Season 3, which messes up the arc and leaves it incomplete, but it's still a great story. 12. Thomas's Train. Ah, the time when Thomas tried to pull a train but left it behind. Classic. the first of many times that Thomas learns patience, and while I don't think it's the best instance in which this lesson is used, it's definitely the most iconic, and for that it deserves a lot of credit. Poor Thomas is so eager to get out of his yard and see the world, and jumps at the first opportunity he gets, and it's very endearing. You want to see him succeed, but unfortunately his eagerness and impatience get the better of him. And from then on, this begins Thomas's arc of becoming a mixed traffic engine, and actually pulling trains, and learning to care for his passengers and be more patient. Lots of lessons learned here. And of course, the other engines won't let him live it down, but he'll prove himself later. Also, the segment of Thomas puffing down the line without the train is just so iconic. Lastly, it should be noted that this is the first time we see Henry sick, which subtly sets up his arc later. Nice. 11. Edward and Gordon. Ah, good old Edward, the kind and wise member of the main cast. His story begins in the midst of a sad time in his life where he hasn't been taken out in a while, as a result of the many big engines that have arrived and been used recently, leaving poor Edward in the dust, who, although not too old at the time of this season, is the oldest engine on the railway, and for that he is teased. But here, his driver and fireman come to give him the wonderful attention, love, and ride he deserves, rising his spirits immediately, and even leaving the other engines jealous. Gordon ends up teasing poor Edward, but ends up needing a helping butt for himself, to which Edward obliges, being as kind as he is. Already 2 episodes in, and we see how kind and forgiving Edward is. And although he doesn't receive the thank you he deserves, he's praised by his crew for another great job, and is rewarded with a new coat of paint, as he deserves. A classic, iconic, lovable episode with my second favorite character, who begins his 2-season-long arc of proving himself to the bigger engines, and showing how worthy and really useful he truly is. And how we too come to see how wonderful he is as an engine and individual, and it's awesome. Not quite as iconic as Thomas and Gordon, but still classic. And into the top 10 we go! Edward, Gordon, and Henry. The last part in the 3 railway engines where the 3 come together for a satisfying conclusion, and it's great! Edward's compassion and determination are at full display. Gordon is arrogant and rude at first, but begins to respect Henry, and I think this is when he's inducted to the 3 big engines group. And Henry has learned his lesson and shows his strength at full force by helping pull the express. Great comeback story and a satisfying conclusion and the beginning of a phenomenal series. A tier. Better than the sad story of Henry for sure. Not quite as iconic as the first 2 episodes, but still really great. And finally, we now go into S tier, where I consider all of these episodes to be masterpieces and among the best of the entire series. So let's do it. 9. Thomas and Gordon. Ah, Thomas and Gordon. The most classic of classic episodes. The one that started it all. Now, how does it hold up? Really well, actually. I mean, who doesn't love Thomas and Gordon? This episode perfectly sets up the world of Sodor and Thomas as the main character with all of his friends, and tells us everything we need to know. The world is realistic, the trains work like real trains, but the thing that matters and is different is that the trains can talk. And that's what makes this series so special. The characters. And right off the bat, both Thomas and Gordon are phenomenal, memorable characters. Thomas is a cheeky, immature little shit, and Gordon is a pompous, stubborn asshole. But as the series goes on, both will grow into extremely likable, mature, and developed characters. But for now, they're still very entertaining. It goes without saying that, and I'll say this mainly once, but that it'll come up again. The model work, the cinematography, the direction, the music, the sets, the writing, the narration, which I'll talk about in a separate video regarding all narrators, all phenomenal. Thomas wants attention and to explore, and finds his entertainment in teasing the bigger engines, and seemingly doesn't receive karma or comeuppance until now. Gordon, on the other hand, could use a reality check himself. While yes, he was one of the most modern and efficient steam engines of his time, he's not perfect, and wouldn't be the fastest in the world for too long. However, both can be equally useful and valuable, and deserve equal respect and compassion, and get it from their fatherly figure, the Fat Controller, or Sir Topham Hatt to us. But that doesn't stop them from being immature. Thomas finally gets his comeuppance in the form of being tricked by Gordon, and it's very entertaining to watch as Thomas gets dragged along for the extremely fast ride of the express, begging for Gordon to stop on the way. And finally, he learns at last what hard work and karma means. Doesn't make it right, of course, but I think he really needed a reality check, and after this, he knows to be careful when teasing the bigger engines. It doesn't always stop him, but he's now a wiser engine. This is the beginning of both Gordon and Thomas's arc, which we'll talk about as the series goes on. Overall, this episode is iconic, and I figured it warranted a longer section, so here it is. S tier easy, among the best of the series, but not quite the best of the season, but one I'll always respect and love. 8. Trouble in the Shed. Now this one is really classic for me because of how many times I've seen it on DVD. Anyway, this episode starts with Topham being called to the sheds, where the big engines are refusing to work and state their case, with Topham temporarily compromising by getting Edward to shunt their trains, who agrees happily to do so. The engines then unfortunately take their grief out on poor Edward as they continue to claim tender engines don't shunt. Topham then goes to pick a new engine to help on the line. Classic good old Percy, another legend in the series, who we already see be cheeky with the big engines, which is always fun. Ultimately, Edward, Thomas, and Percy band together to take the trains while the big engines are shut up in the shed and have a great time. It's all very satisfying and well written. It continues the big engine's arc and begins Percy's very well, teaching a solid lesson of no one is above work and karma will bite you in the ass if you're pompous. All the characters are spot on here and I love it. Excellent S tier episode. 7. Thomas and Bertie. The classic race between Thomas and Bertie, and it's an amazing episode. Such a fun plot. While yeah, it's another steam versus other vehicle, it's probably the best version of this plot type. Thomas and Bertie are both great here and have a very fun rivalry, as Thomas lets his ego get the best of him as he challenges the bus to a race, but Bertie has a big ego too, so it's kinda on both of them. But yeah, the race is a lot of fun with a very catchy theme, great shots, especially of Bertie on the road, as it's always nice to see Sodor in a different light, and excellent pacing, direction, and narration. While Thomas ultimately wins and Bertie is humbled, I feel like they both learn to be a bit more respectful and not so cocky and full of themselves, regardless of who won, and nonetheless found great fun in it and will race again many times after, despite Topham's orders not to. This is the beginning of a great rivalry and charming friendship, and for that and everything else, I love this episode, one of the best of the season. S tier. 6. Cole. The beginning of one of my favorite arcs of the series, Henry's arc in season 1. Poor Henry is sicker than ever, and the other engines shrug it off and invalidate his feelings. But it's not his fault. He can't help it was a faulty design. But ultimately, after being granted the opportunity to prove himself after receiving some special coal, he has an excellent comeback, and it's awesome. Henry has always been a sympathetic character, and it really starts here, as he essentially has a disability and is given the accommodation he needs, and is able to prove himself. It's badass, and I love Henry a lot here. Henry's ride with his special coal is so satisfying, with excellent music, dialogue, and narration. Also really like how well they explain Henry's problems and that he needs special coal. Great, realistic addition. Very inspiring and heartwarming episode, but the follow-up is even better. S tier. 5. Thomas and the Breakdown Train. The day Thomas saved the day and earned his branch line, which absolutely serves as a great plot for this excellent episode. We see how far Thomas has come when he springs into action to help James when the trucks have got him on the run, and it's awesome as his initial character arc comes to a close. It's so satisfying to have seen Thomas grow so much to the point that he cares and is mature enough to take the initiative to help an engine in need, even one that's teased him. Thomas doesn't hesitate to help and works hard to clear up the mess, and it's great. Thomas's actions are admirable and commendable here, and his reward of the branch line feels deserved after his character arc. And it kicks off another series-long arc of becoming the mature, wise, and kind engine that he is in the Brenner era, although his cheekiness and naivete will always be present to an extent. James's crash here is great, and although we don't learn much about him as it's his introduction, it's solid nonetheless, and he's a tragic character off the bat, but gets his time to shine later, as we've already discussed. Overall, an S tier episode, another one of the best. 4. Toby and the Stout Gentleman. What an endearing, amazing episode! Toby is such a lovable character, and this story is so beautiful and tragic at the same time, as Toby lived a wonderful life on his old line, and he meets a kind family, the Hats, that he has a great day with, and will remember fondly, but ultimately his happy days come to an end as modernization marches on. But he has a wonderful, albeit sad farewell, and later, the kind man comes back to preserve him as his life starts anew. I always love when people call back to this episode in both the series and fan series, both in regards to Toby's origins, as well as his close relationship with the original Fat Controller. Love the relationship between Topham and Toby so much. Anyway, yeah, beautiful story, Toby is a phenomenal character, S tier episode, one of the best of the season. 3. Thomas and the Trucks. A classic episode with an excellent soundtrack and simple but effective plot. Thomas wants to go out more and pull trains, and Edward, being the kind engine he is, gives him the chance, but because of his carelessness and inexperience, he fails spectacularly and almost crashes. Poor Thomas still had a lot to learn about trucks, and it's very clear here. Still, it's a very enjoyable watch. Poor Thomas was so excited, so you feel bad for him. Really great episode, one of the season's best. Great part in Thomas's character development. Like I said, simple, but because of its tone, vibe, and storytelling, it's S tier. 2. Troublesome Trucks. This episode is so damn good. It starts with poor James in the shed after being shut up for his antics, and despite his dumbass actions in the last episode, you feel bad for him, especially with that tear in his eye, and is, because of Topham's forgiving and generous nature, given a second chance. Although he's teased by Thomas at first, he doesn't let that stop him from trying. He's a bit careless at first with the trucks, but is determined to not give up and prove himself after his mistake, and it's awesome. You gotta root for and love the guy. However, in the middle, as everything looks easier, some of the trucks break away. Nonetheless, James starts again, and although Edward offers to help, he respectfully declines and manages on his own. I love the little interaction here. James is polite to Edward, and Edward encourages him kindly to not give up. And then, James finally manages to pull them over the hill and finish the delivery and wins the day with a huge grin on his face and a congratulations from Topham. He beat the trucks, he proved his worth once, and will do it again soon. I love it. That's my boy. Phenomenal part of his arc and the peak of James in season 1. S tier. But, of course, there's one episode that's even better. Number 1, The Flying Kipper. And of course, here's the obvious best episode of the season. Is this really a surprise? Henry's ride with the Kipper is enchanting and magical thanks to the beautiful visuals, amazing music. The narration is great and enhances the episode, but I wish there was less because of how great the ride is on its own. But of course, his ride comes to an unfortunate, tragic end as a faulty signal causes a nasty accident, which is one of the best of the series and best of the season. We love crashes in this house. Poor Henry didn't deserve this, but is rewarded with an overhaul in the form of a better shape that lets him become a better engine, and his return is so satisfying. I just love Henry's arc in this season. I'm not as passionate about this episode as other people, but it's still a phenomenal one and a personal favorite. But I also really love a lot of these episodes, especially the top 9, which are all favorites of mine. Also, a great ending with the narrator mentioning that Gordon is jealous of how well Henry pulls the express. Classic. Anyway, yeah, of course this one is S tier. So yeah, guys, that's my take on season 1. It's one of the best and one of my favorites, but not the best of all. But to answer my earlier question, yes, it holds up for the most part. It can be a little boring or dull at times, but for the most part, it's charming, endearing, vibrant, full of life and creativity, and wonderful characters, stories, directing, music, and narration in both dubs, and has some of the best episodes of the series. And for that, it absolutely rules. So I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'm excited to take on the rest of the seasons with you all in the coming year when I have time. Have a good one, friends, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!